Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I trust you've had a good week and that you're looking forward to the weekend, as am I. Just wanted to mention that next weekend I'm going to be in London, and I'm looking forward to what's called the Homecoming Revolution. It's on the 15th and the 16th of March at Olympia, and this is all about folks, who've from Africa, gone abroad, coming back. The link is on Rich Wrap-Ups, and Angel Jones, with a name like that, you're always going to get a meeting in my office. Anyway, she got in touch with me, and she's the founder, and visited me one afternoon, and I'm very much looking forward to going there. And her tagline on Twitter is ex-advertising chick. I think it was Versace. A yippie, which is a yuppie and a hippie. And then I'm looking forward to being in Maputo for the IMF's iconic Africa Rising conference in May. High-level conference hosted by the IMF and the government of Mozambique in Maputo on May 29, May 30th. Of course, Madame Christine Lagarde was my, as I described it, my maraschino cherry on top of this ice cream sundae moment at the beginning of the year. I'll put up the link for her Mindspeak session, and I was thinking about her actually, and she's seriously impressive. And I was thinking to myself, it's entirely binary. They say power is very attractive, and especially intelligent power like hers. And whenever she got thrown these questions, I was waiting for her answers, and they're always very well thought out, well constructed, very clever. And of course, she said the kindest things to Hannah, who said to her, when she gave her the roses, "Oh, I want to be just like you." And Madame Lagarde replied, "Work hard and you can be anything you want to be." I put up a photograph of the actual moment when she said that. And of course, Maputo does have the most flavoursome and wonderful tiger prawns. I wrote about Maputo boomtown, saying it's popped large onto the global radar because of gas reserves that have been discovered offshore and in the deep sea. And I think it's going to be the next Qatar. I'll put up a photograph of the sunrise as seen from the Palana Hotel. My home thoughts, let me start with the fact that I didn't mention this, that I watched Ridley Scott's The Counselor, 2013 British-American thriller film directed by Ridley Scott. Film stars Michael Fassbender as the titular counsellor who gets in over his head in a drugs deal around the troubled Juarez, Mexico-Texas border area, as well as Cameron Diaz, Javier Bardem, Penelope Cruz, and Brad Pitt. It is really extremely good. We got some rain last night, and on that note, I'll put up a photograph of the rain clouds I took 21 days ago. And in fact, the very next day, the heavens opened as they did yesterday. I, of course, finished Don DeLillo's Point Omega, which is wonderful and luminous, as I've told you before, and I'm back on Inherent Vice. And I'm going to give you, by Thomas Pynchon, 2 quotes. "Odd, yes, here in the capital of eternal youth, endless summer, and all that fear should be running the town again, as in days of old, like the Hollywood blacklist you don't remember, and the what's rioting you do, it spreads like blood in a swimming pool, till it occupies all the volume of the day. And then maybe some playful soul shows up with a bucket full of piranhas, dumps them in the pool, and right away they can taste the blood. They swim around looking for what's bleeding, but they don't find anything, all of them getting more and more crazy, till the craziness reaches a point, which is when they begin to feed on each other." Later they went outside, where a light rain was blowing in, mixed with salt spray feathering off the surf. Shasta wandered slowly down to the beach and through the white, wet sand, her nape in a curve she had learned from times when back-turning came into it, the charm of. Doc followed the prints of her bare feet already collapsing into rain and shadow, as if in a fool's attempt to find his way back into a past that, despite them both, had gone on into the future. It did. The surf, only now and then visible, was hammering at his spirit, knocking things loose, some to fall into the dark and be lost forever, some to edge into the fitful light of his attention, whether he wanted to see them or not. Put up a photograph of the view of Nairobi from the 8th floor 44 days ago, and the reason I put it up is because, of course, in one of Pynchon's books, it starts about screaming, crossing the sky. And many people feel that was a premonition of September 11. And then from there, because Pynchon tends to take you into sort of a hallucinatory world, I'm going to put up that photograph I took, and all that are left are fragments which haunt you like half-forgotten dreams. Political reflections. Crimea's parliament voted to join Russia on Thursday, and its Moscow-backed government set a referendum within 10 days. Far from seeking a diplomatic way out of the crisis, Putin appears to have chosen to create facts on the ground before the West can agree on more than token action against him. Frankly, he's been winning for a while now. The guided missile destroyer USS Truxtun departs for a scheduled deployment in the Black Sea, apparently. And I'll also put up a photograph of some poppy fields in Crimea. Henry Kissinger, probably written the only sensible thing about Ukraine that I've come across, says the test of policy is how it ends, not how it begins. The West must understand that to Russia, Ukraine can never be a foreign country. Russian history began in what was called Kievan Rus. The Russian religion spread from there. Ukraine has been part of Russia for centuries, and their histories were intertwined before then. Some of the most important battles for Russian freedom, starting with the Battle of Poltava in 1709, were fought on Ukrainian soil. The Black Sea Fleet, Russia's means of projecting power in the Mediterranean, is based by long-term lease in Sevastopol in Crimea. And saying, Kissinger thinks Ukraine should not join NATO, but, talking a little bit of sense in what has become a very hysterical argument. Iran will soon receive a second installment of previously frozen assets which are being returned to it under an interim nuclear agreement with world powers. The official Vala Allah Safe said on Wednesday that the new funds will be transferred to Iran's account in the next 3 days, but did not state the amount. Basically, they're getting back access to $4.2 billion of oil revenues, which have been frozen for a while. I came across this photograph of the Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Look at the body language in the photograph. You can see Abe is a little bit nervous about getting too up close and personal with the Iranians. And then I came across the Quadrennial Defense Review 2014, and I'll just read a couple of paragraphs. The United States faces a rapidly changing security environment. We are repositioning to focus on the strategic challenges and opportunities that will define our future, new technologies, new centers of power, and a world that is growing more volatile, more unpredictable, and in some instances more threatening to the United States. Challenges to our many allies and partners around the globe remain dynamic and unpredictable. That's the world we live in today, isn't it? Dynamic and unpredictable, particularly from regimes in North Korea and Iran. Unrest and violence persist elsewhere, creating a fertile environment for violent extremism and sectarian conflict, especially in fragile areas stretching from the Sahel to South Asia, and threatening US citizens abroad. Meanwhile, modern warfare is evolving rapidly, leading to increasingly contested battle space in the air, sea, and space domains, as well as cyberspace, in which our forces enjoy dominance in our most recent conflicts. Then there is a rebalancing for a broad spectrum of conflict. Future conflicts could range from hybrid contingencies against proxy groups using asymmetric approaches to a high-end conflict against state power armed with WMD or technologically advanced anti-access and area denial capabilities. China is very much focused on exactly that, anti-access and area denial capabilities. It's an interesting piece, well worth reading in full if you've got the time. Currency markets, euro 138.56. The ECB, as I thought it might, left the inflation interest rate unchanged at 0.25%, and the euro had a sharp spike, and we're now around 138.73. Dollar index, soft as you like, 79.67. The yen has softened 1.2% against the dollar this week, last at 102.98. But I think, I remain bullish the yen actually. Swiss franc 0.8795, pound 167.38. The Aussie 0.9087 has been recovering of late. Traded as high as 0.9113 yesterday, which was the strongest level since December 11. It's climbed 1.8% this week. India rupee back at 61 now, 61.04. South Korean won 1061.71. That's risen 0.4% in the past 5 days. Real 232.28. Egyptian pound 696.03, and the South African rand 1062.57. So right up against resistance. I'm going to put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index, and it really is not exhibiting any vigor. New York Fed President William Dudley said in New York yesterday that while harsh weather will hurt growth during the first quarter, it does not prompt a fundamental change in the outlook. And I tend to agree with him. I think they had a soft spot, a soft patch, weather related, but I think that's going to start to ebb now. Euro dollar, we're now at 138.73. Draghi calls the Eurozone an island of stability, which I think is an interesting way of describing Europe. Dollar yen 102.98. I'm bullish on the yen near term, especially anything with above 103. The S&P closed at a record for the 4th time over the past 6 sessions. Equity markets in the developed countries have firmed up. Commodity markets, the Standard & Poor's GSCI spot index of 24 commodities has climbed 3.1% this year. Of course, it's been led by a 77% surge for coffee and gains for hogs, corn and gold. Arabica coffee, which is favored by Starbucks, reached a 2-year high this week amid the driest summer since 1972 for Brazil, which is the biggest grower. Crude oil, of course, touched 105.22 a barrel on March the 3rd as tensions escalated in the Ukraine, but I think that is overpriced. I would be selling that. World food prices posted the biggest gain in 19 months in February on concern that cold weather and drought in the US and dryness in top sugar producer Brazil will harm crops. Somebody saying we're in a period of rising unpredictability around climate change, and I entirely agree with that. I'm going to put up a 3-month chart of gold, which has gone even higher to 1350.275, and it's jumped 12% since December in a very strong rally. Crude oil 101.94 last. I think the equilibrium price is nearer $90, and I'll put up also a 1-year chart of sugar, which has had a good rebound. Frontier markets, I like this photograph of the beach on Dahlak Islands in Eritrea. And I like this, a sifteli belonging to Sadiq Fazliu, an Albanian folk musician who makes all his instruments by hand. Coming to Africa, heavenly currency intervention is sought. This is Wall Street Journal Africa. Accra, a rising US dollar, has stirred many pastors here into nightly prayers for their fallen currency to rise again. I command the resurrection of the Cedi in the name of Jesus, preached evangelist Nicholas Duncan Williams of a mega church called Action Chapel recently. Then he addressed Satan, take your hands off the central bank. African countries are having a devil of a year due in large part to the slump in their currencies from Gambia to Zambia. Sharp drops against the US dollar making imported goods more expensive, forcing shopkeepers to raise prices, slowing business at many of Africa's gleaming new shopping malls, car dealerships and fast food restaurants. In Ghana, the Cedi lost 11% against the dollar in the first 2 months of 2014. Some radio personalities blamed the free fall on the devil, others on mythical dwarves who practice witchcraft in the forest. These dwarves, the black magic, is what has made the Cedi lose value. Economists blame the currency weakness on more worldly reasons, such as the US Federal Reserve's decision to trim its bond buying. Compounding these pressures from afar is a problem of Africa's own making, big budget deficits. Many African governments preside over a rising and demanding middle class and face ever more competitive elections, yet their revenue still mostly comes from exports of raw materials like gold, oil, platinum, iron ore, or copper. And global prices for those commodities are falling. That means African revenue is falling, but government spending generally isn't. Zambia increased civil servant wages by 50% last year. Prices for its key export, copper, like 90% of its income, fell 7%. Budget deficit that the IMF thinks will hit 8.5% of GDP last year, nearly double the government's 4.3% target. South Africa, similar crunch. Nigeria's central bank governor warned that his country also could find itself scrambling for revenue. Nigeria is more than anybody else in big trouble, said Lamido Sanusi, comparing Nigeria to peer oil exporters. A decade of dazzling growth has swept through Africa's biggest cities, leaving about 1,000 KFCs by Yum Brands and 380 megastores from Walmart Stores Inc.'s South African unit Massmart. Advertisements in Accra offer freshly tiled condos at a princely sum of $3,000 a month, saying that the government in Ghana spent heavily, triple civil servant salaries, a politically popular raise based on the hope that new oil and gold extraction would keep soaring. Instead, the price of gold fell 28% last year. Ghana's budget deficit doubled to almost 11% of the value of the entire economy, and the Cedi plunged to 24%. Freshly erected shopping malls are empty. New airlines fly half full. Landlords say rents for flashy condominiums are backsliding. Utilities are rationing water and electricity. And my comment was, the Achilles heel of the African resurgence is the recurrent expenditure, which is salaries, component of their budgets. Essentially, government in Africa is fabulously expensive, and its productivity shockingly low. As our economies grow and Africa is seeking to accelerate its convergence, it's happening about that, let there be no doubt. African governments are beginning to load their balance sheets. The train wreck risk, whilst a residual one, might grow, because I have yet to see or meet an African politician who is prepared to take a scalpel to the cost of delivering government in Africa. Very interesting piece in The Economist about African demography. The dividend is delayed. How unusual is Africa's demography? If you take a selection of countries from Algeria and Tunisia in the north to Botswana and South Africa in the south, you may answer, not that unusual. In the early 60s, those nations had fertility rates of between 5.5 and 7.5, meaning the average woman there could expect to have that number of children during her lifetime. A recent study by two French-speaking demographers cast doubt on this picture of convergence between Africa and the rest. And basically, what they've come up with is that they're saying Africa is not going according to that trend. People continue to have more children than would be expected, and that if you look at, if you calculate the highest possible outcome of the population, you're looking at something much higher than what people are predicting. And I said, the demographic dividend was always a binary thing and could morph into a demographic time bomb. And what is called their high variant projection puts that second option into sharper focus. The population skew young, connected to the 21st century via their mobile phones. Expectation levels are a multiple of any other preceding generation. All point at a very fluid, even dangerous moment for African governments. Orange has hired an advisor for an African exit. Orange has mandated Lazard to find a buyer for its mobile telecoms business in Uganda, hot on the heels of the sale of Wari Telecom's local unit to Bharti Airtel. Orange is thought to be planning an exit from several markets in Africa where it does not already hold a number 1 or 2 spot. Aside from Uganda, which is thought to be the only geography where an official process is underway, this could also include Orange Mobile's businesses in Kenya, DRC and Niger. And that's essentially stop loss. Tunisia, the President of the Republic, issued a decree to lift the state of emergency beginning on March 5, 2014. This is largely symbolic. That's where the entire revolutionary ferment began, you'll remember. Mozambique opposition wants foreign mediation. Maputo, Mozambique's main opposition party, Renamo, revived its demand for foreign mediation of ongoing talks with the government aimed at ending renewed hostilities between the two old foes. The government has no wish to internationalize the discussions. We have made it clear that the issue under discussion now should be the immediate and unconditional disarming of Renamo. So far, Renamo has not disarmed a single one of its gunmen, despite extracting all the key concessions it wanted from the government on the electoral laws. Also on Wednesday, Antonio Muchanga, spokesman for Renamo leader Alfonso Dhlakama, claimed that units of the riot police and of the army had bombarded the Gorongosa mountain range, where Dhlakama is believed to be hiding, with heavy artillery. Clearly pretty fluid. Eskom starts first South Africa power blackout since 2008, rolling scheduled blackouts in South Africa for the first time in 6 years. South African all shares at a record high and is plus 3.75% this year. South Africa's main anti-corruption watchdog said on Thursday it would release its report into a $21 million state-funded security upgrade to President Jacob Zuma's private home on March 19, less than 2 months before a general election. Standard Bank reported full-year earnings. What I found interesting, more than satisfactory, was the rest of Africa business, where growth in aggregate headline earnings was 44%. This is a trend I'm seeing across the board. This acceleration in Sub-Saharan Africa versus South Africa. Dollar Rand right at resistance, key level. If it can break through here, we go to 10.55 and then get pretty quickly to 10. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. Egyptian pound 696.05. The Egyptian stock market up 17.27%, and I think it's second only to Dubai in the world. Nigerian all share down 5.5%. I'm bearish about it. I saw a Reuters report about a T-bill auction saying foreign participation was very marginal. It's probably that as those bills mature, some international investors won't roll over the position in the new auctions, so they'll just take their FX and leave. That's the risk. Ghana Stock Exchange up 12.84% this year, but a lot of that return has been eroded because of the weak Cedi. Zimbabwe is holding gold coins valued at $501,390 as its only reserves, enough to buy only 1,400 tons of maize. Interesting piece by a fund manager out of the Middle East. It says that we believe we want to be the first Cape to Cairo broker, and there's a lot of interest around broking stock brokerage facilities for this part of the world. And then the Uganda president says he wants poachers shot on sight. You can cripple tourism for years when one European is killed in a national park. Those with guns who cross to disturb you should shoot them, the president was quoted as telling border security guards. Bamburi Cement has reported full-year profit after tax down 24.764%, turnover down 9.503%, operating profit down 23.373%, profit after tax down 24.764%, full-year earnings down 21.52%, but they raised the dividend. They've in fact ended up paying out 115.18% of the earnings per share as dividend. Speaking about some competitive pressure in Uganda, significant reduction of exports out of Uganda to the inland African markets. as affecting their performance. They've been on a declining earnings trend for the last 24 months, but I think we'll see a basing out now. The Nairobi Oil Share is up 3.28% in 2014. The NSE 20 is down 0.6%. The Nairobi Oil Share yesterday rebounded 0.585% to close at 140.94. Big gaps, heavily traded. To the upside, Safaricom firm 0.8547%. KCB was strong, up 1.7045%. EABL plus 0.38%. And I think it's signaling there's been a bit of concern because for 24 months foreigners were net buyers of Kenyan equities. January, February snapped that 24-month trend with net sellers. And I think yesterday we saw that sort of trend change in the first 2 months of the year. It's probably run its course. Of course, the big news in the agricultural sectors around these competing offers for Ria Vipinga. Chris Karubi's 75 shillings in the bag and in the hand. Ria Vipinga's 70 shillings in the hand plus 15 of upside. But the interesting point to note is the price now that people are willing to pay is 176% higher than the price that pertained in the stock market. And that frankly applies to every stock in that sector. Other than that, I think the market looks fairly well poised actually. A little bit of rotation going on. Results continue to come in, but essentially well supported at these levels. Wish you a great weekend.